let's have a chat with Jonathan Davis, our economy wealth manager, who seems to have been a bit of a hit on the show every time he's been on so far. So let's see where he stands, where his own opinion is, but also what the objective facts are as well. Jonathan Davis joins us now. Hi, Jonathan.
Hello, John.
Let's get that out of the way first and foremost. Have you actually got a political view on whether we should be in or out? And do you want to express that, and then do you want to tell us the facts?
I do. We should all vote to leave the EU.
Oh, right, okay, so that's on the table. Now try to be objective. Why should we vote to leave the EU, my friend?
I'm entirely objective about this. There's no subjectivity whatsoever. There's no question we should be out, simply because we have no control over our affairs. There's Cameron with Donald Tusk in number 10 begging him for us to do something in our country.
Yeah.
Tusk is, of course, unelected. Now to the economic side of things. The Remain crowd say if we were to leave the EU, then we would put at risk millions of jobs, and it would harm our economy directly. Utter, arrant nonsense.
Hang on, why is that utter, arrant nonsense? Because they're saying our main export trade is the EU. Now, I know that, smoke and mirrors. You explain it to us, what they're saying.
45% of UK exports go into the EU.
Right.
So what? That means 55% go outside of the EU. And the idea that we wouldn't be selling minis to Germany because they're made by BMW, and the idea that we wouldn't be buying Volkswagens from Munich is absolute, utter nonsense. As Lord Digby Jones said on TV just yesterday, quite rightly, the day after we hope that we vote to leave the EU, the Germans will be on to Brussels saying we must establish a trade deal with the United Kingdom immediately.
Yeah.
Because Germany, pretty well, apart from depending on China, depends on Britain's exports. Exports to Britain.
So why are they spinning this line then? Is it because the politicians all want to be part of that European superstate and part of that, I keep saying, choo-choo, they all want to be on the gravy train? Is it as simplistic as that?
Yeah, the politicians themselves are certainly on the gravy train. I mean, you can think of countless examples where these politicians have made literally fortunes by being part of that gravy train. The Kinnocks, for example, I mean, I'm not saying what political party, if any, that I support, but the Kinnocks, come on, they've made £12 million out of being bureaucrats in the EU. You can't imagine the number of thousands of bureaucrats and politicians there are in the EU on tax-free salaries. It's quite remarkable. And the reason why big business is supporting the EU is because bureaucrats at that level support big business to the detriment of SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises. There are millions of SMEs in the UK. There are a few thousand big businesses. The big businesses love bureaucracy because they spend a minute tiny percent of their profits on meeting regulations, whereas SMEs spend a large proportion of their time, energy and money on meeting regulations. Thus, regulations put SMEs out of business and help big business.
But of course the pro-staying in brigade say that SMEs are helped by the fact that we've got sort of equivalent standards right across Europe, that they can trade more freely. Of course, they'd like a single currency as well. But that's the point they make, that it opens up trade for our SMEs. You'd dispute that, would you?
I certainly would. I mean, the obvious example is Switzerland, which borders several EU countries. Switzerland is not in the EU, but of course it's in the heart of Europe. It has the highest per capita wealth in the whole of Europe. Remember, the EU is not Europe, but it isn't. But Switzerland is not in the EU. Switzerland trades fully with the EU, as the UK would. Of course it would. We are the biggest customer of the EU. Of course the EU will want to trade with us.
What about us trading with the rest of our old Commonwealth? I mean, one of the fastest growing economies is indeed India. That would all open up to us, wouldn't it, if we were no longer part of this trading bloc?
Well, again, the Remain side say, oh no, Britain has influence when we're doing trade deals on behalf of all members of the EU, when we're talking to India and China and America, Britain has influence. Again, utter nonsense, because whenever Britain says X, the EU, Brussels say Y, because it benefits other countries to the detriment of the United Kingdom. So that's exactly the point that I started off with. Although 45% of our exports go to the EU, 55% currently go outside of the EU, and if we were to leave the EU, we would be selling far more stuff and services to the fastest growing economies on the planet, such as India, as you say, and China, which, although isn't a slowdown just now, it's going to be one of the countries of the 21st century, perhaps obviously. The Commonwealth, as you quite rightly say, is a sector of the world economy that we do have influence over, but we cannot arrange trade deals with them, with Australia, with Canada. It's beyond belief. We absolutely must leave the EU for economic and political reasons, not least of all being that we will be able to make decisions to benefit ourselves.
Do you think the British public are being informed properly of both sides of the arguments, Jonathan? Or do you think what's actually happening, which is my view, this is all being rushed through? He's going to hopefully declare something today, this afternoon, or this evening. Then we're going to hurtle towards that June election, and there isn't going to a referendum. There's not going to be enough time to put both sides of the argument forward. What do you think?
Well, on the one hand, the polls are saying it's pretty even between the Remains and the Leaves. In other words, it'll be the don't knows, which are between 15 and 25% of the voters who will actually decide the referendum. I'm not yet convinced that the referendum will be in June, because we've got the local council elections in May, and that means that in effect two votes will be being debated and argued in the media and by politicians at the same time.
Yeah.
However, it wouldn't surprise me if we go for June, or more importantly, if Cameron goes for June, because of course he and his cronies absolutely want the UK to stay in the EU. Now, your question is, are we being adequately informed? I have to say, given that most programs on the radio and the television will have someone from Remain and someone from Leave to discuss and debate at the same time, then that would suggest that we're adequately informed on both sides. Of course, the newspapers, there's basically only one or two that I can see. That's the Express and the Telegraph, which are essentially saying we should leave. Maybe the Sun as well is coming that say. I'm not quite sure. However,
I don't think Rupert's told them yet, but he has put a tweet out now saying we've got to secure our borders. I mean, it is ridiculous that the Sun is not, still trying to sit on the fence on this one. They're allowing their columnists now to basically come out and say we should be leaving, but they're not. So I would imagine they're just about to declare. I think they'll declare this week, to be honest.
The Sun certainly will be a mover of don't knows.
Yeah.
It's the BBC that's got most to be accused of rant bias here. When they have people on the opinion-forming show, the Today programme on Radio 4, it tends to be the Remain lot, not a balanced Remain and Leave. But, par for the course, really.
Somebody says here, just before you go, Kevin, it says the UK is the second largest market for Ferraris in the world. Do you think the Italians are going to stop if we left the EU? I doubt it.
Well, exactly. The trade will continue. I mean, one of the arguments that the Remain people say, but, Switzerland has to pay a lot of money in order to have these trade deals. Well, I'll tell you what that lot of money is. Pound for pound, it's 1/6 of what we are paying. Obviously, they're a much smaller country, but pound for pound, it's 1/6. So you can reasonably assume that if we vote to leave the EU, we will pay 1/6 of what we are currently paying. And on top of that, the trade will continue, the jobs will continue, and on top of that, we'll be able to do trade deals around the world, which means we'll get even more jobs. Hold
on, you've got people asking you questions now. Does Jonathan have a view on the effects of TTIP? That's the big new trade deal. Explain what that is to people if we don't know.
Well, in essence, I mean, I say this without exaggeration. It is fascism. It's the coming together of the corporation and state, which, as many of your listeners will immediately have realised, is what Mussolini called fascism. TTIP is essentially where huge multinationals will, I would say, be able to dictate to governments what happens. And it's the ultimate in the corporation takeover. And the US authorities, they support it because they are bought and paid for by the multinationals. And Brussels supports TTIP because they are bought and paid for by the multinationals. TTIP will be absolutely dreadful for the average person right across the EU, not just the UK.
Okay, and just before you go, of course, we had the man, Peter Barron, used to run Newsnight, had booked me a few times. He's now the head of PR for Europe for Google. Saw him on the Andrew Marr show. Turns out Facebook have only paid $4,000 in corporation tax. That story's not going away, is it, Jonathan? And the anger surrounding it either.
Well, you're a long in the tooth, if I may say, media man, and you will know that if it's in the pages in the newspapers for more than a few days, then the incumbent government has a problem. Basically, Osborne's messed up here. He thought by taking 130 million from Google for 10 years of profits that would appease the British people. Well, he's being absolutely proved incorrect on this, and it appears practically everyone in the media is agreeing with us.
Yeah, right across the spectrum. Great talking to you, Jonathan. Thank you very much indeed. Jonathan Davis, our economy wealth manager, with his very strong views